ahead and get that started. Thank you all for joining today's session on CMMC 2.0 compliance. It needn't be difficult or costly. As we all know, with everything going on in the world and world events, being cyber ready and having good cyber posture and shields up is becoming even more and more important today. And we're going to talk to you about how you can help make that happen without it being super difficult for you. Next slide, Mike. So just briefly, in terms of the agenda today, we will go ahead and introduce the presenters of this session, and particularly our partners from Digital Beachhead. They will talk a little bit about the current NIST requirements, what you need to know, and how that transforms into the impending CMMC requirements. Digital Beachhead folks will talk a little bit about their playbook for helping make this easy and affordable for you, having good cyber posture, and of course, making sure that you're meeting the requirements to work with contracts today and the contracts you'll be dealing with in the future. And then we'll talk a little briefly about how SureShield helps support the efforts of Digital Beachhead with our technology that are used to help in that process. And we will go on to Q&A. As part of the session as well, just so everyone knows, you will be receiving at the conclusion of this a copy of this presentation, as well as a copy of the recording. We will also take a couple of polls throughout the session. There will just be two, and we ask that you look for those and go ahead and respond to those polls. Mike, next slide, please. So I'd like to introduce the presenters today. I'm Tom Leahy. I am the head of sales and business development with SureShield. We are a technology provider focused in security, compliance, and integrity. And we leverage a technology platform that partners use to help make processes of compliance and security more efficient. I've been in compliance and risk management for about 30 years and am really happy to introduce our presenter, Mike Crandall. Mike is a 21-year Air Force veteran and the current CEO of Digital Beachhead. He was a founding member of the DoD's Cyber Defense In-Depth Barrier Reef concept, which went on to become the Combat Information Transport System Base Information Protection Program. Mike led the team that developed and implemented the first DoD Network Operations and Security Center. And he completed his military career managing a $50 billion Air Force satellite control network. Since leaving the Air Force, Mike started and has grown Digital Beachhead to a multinational company. His company was one of the first candidate C3 CPAOs. So tongue twister, Mike. Yes.
Yes, guy. Welcome to Star Wars.
Yes, within the CMMC ecosystem, and as you can tell, he brings extensive knowledge to helping develop a sustainable cybersecurity posture environment for the clients that they serve. For those of you that get a chance to talk with Mike later, you'll find he has had just a really fascinating career and clearly brings a ton of knowledge to help folks get prepared for this and help put your organizations in good standing. So with that, Mike, I want to turn the presentation over to you. I appreciate you being here and helping the folks here today.
No worries. I appreciate that, Tom. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for showing up. If you are a part of the defense industry base or you have a government contract working with the Department of Defense, CMMC is coming towards you. It's been in the works for a while. We are now on version 2.0. The main differences between CMMC, the original, and CMMC version 2.0 is it went from a 5-level system to a 3-level system. Levels 2 and level 4, which were just levels that kind of were not going to be evaluated, but kind of transport you to the other levels, the DoD wisely removed. So now we just have levels 1, 2, and 3, which correlated to what levels 1, 3, and 5 used to be. With that, the DoD expects to have an interim rule to enforce implementation by 2023. Those that have been following CMMC have heard it slide to the right and watched it slide to the right. But the DoD is now beginning to firm up expectations and what they expect. We are waiting for the official rule set. As I say, they plan to implement the interim rule in about a year. So after 2 months post the interim rule being implemented, they do hope to have it into contracts. Between you and me and the people who are kind of in the know, that kind of comes in at end of year. And I don't know if contracting officers will want to be changing rule sets in an end of year environment. So I am actually guessing October 2023 will be probably when the first contracts with CMMC requirements will start to roll out. That's just Mike Crandall's guess, having been in the military and been in the DoD. We know they don't like to do changes during end of year, but that is what I would expect. So why do we even have CMMC and the NIST requirements? The Department of Defense wants to maintain a certain level of cybersecurity infrastructure with its contractors. Up until now, it's been a lot of us just signing off, those of us who've worked in the DoD contracting world, signing off saying, yeah, I promise I'm doing this. That was the requirement. That has since moved to no, really show us you're doing it and provide a scorecard using NIST 800-171. 800-171 is a supply chain focused control set, which is a subset of 853, NIST 853. So with that, the DoD wanted to formalize a evaluation standard that companies would be audited on versus just signing or sending up a scorecard. And that is where CMMC came from. They wanted to formalize it. So the objective is to protect that unclassified, that controlled unclassified information, CUI, in our non-federal information systems. It applies to all non-federal entities, contractors, vendors, suppliers that process, store, transmit, or protect CUI for the Department of Defense. It also protects contracting information at the level 1, which is just your basic contracts. With those, there are 17 controls. And then with level 2, which used to be level 3, but with CMMC 2, it is now just level 2, there's the 110 control sets. So there's a lot to go through. So what is CUI, controlled unclassified information? And to be honest, that's a great question. The government is still trying to narrow that down and define it. There's lots of documentation that scopes CUI. The basic underlying component, though, is that the government must identify it. So within your contracts with the federal government, you should have a call out saying that your company or your organization will be provided CUI information or will create CUI information for the government. If you do not have that, you should not have any CUI information. I say should not because we all know the government is notorious for saying, nope, no CUI will be shared with you. And then you'll get an email that says this information contains CUI. So as anything, when you work with the government, it's a work in progress. But effectively, CUI is specifically identified, unclassified information that needs a separate level of control. So CMMC is very much based on, as I said, NIST 800-171, which is a subset of 853, which is found in most of our contracts that say we should be looking to mature ourselves based on 853. It establishes controls to protect and secure CUI and other important data. 800-171 really has a bunch of, like I say, 110 controls that basically provide you a strong basis for network security. They are broken out into domains, which we'll get into next. But the benefits of being compliant go beyond, I've done my due diligence and I've checked the box and I can have government contracts now. It is truly strengthening the cybersecurity landscape of your organization. But with our briefing today, it does not need to be overly expensive or difficult to be compliant with 800.171. And here are just some of the key points of why 800.171 can be beneficial to your organization above and beyond being compliant so that you can get government work. The 14 domains of NIST 800.171.
And Mike,
yes.
Just a quick question for you, or
Perfect.
For the folks that we're here with. Is it stands today, as everyone should know, is it is a requirement for them to be in compliance with 800.171, mostly for right. Certainly for new contracts, and really, as this being the foundation, it's just rolling into the next process under CMMC 2.0. So we wanted to just take a brief poll with the folks that are here to find out, first of all, have you completed an 800.171 assessment in the past? And really, if you have or have not, understanding that CMMC is coming, when do you plan on trying to meet those particular requirements? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll briefly and let folks go ahead and please go to that poll and answer those questions for us. But really, it's a foundational requirement even today. And I think it's safe to say that with everything that is going on right now, you can be assured that even though the CMMC process has not been completed or been signed off yet, they're probably going to put a lot more emphasis on making sure that you're 800.171 compliant. And I think from what I've heard, a lot of the folks that might be subcontractors are definitely seeing that from their primes as well. Would you say that's the case, Mike?
Yes, absolutely. So right now, if you have a government contract, it should call out that you need to upload your 800.171 score, which is there's a spreadsheet that'll give you a scorecard based on your compliance, and that has to be uploaded so that the government has it. Right now, they don't have a minimum score or a maximum score or the perfect medium score. They're just saying upload your score, but that's all in preparation. As I say, we've been signing off for years on our government contracts that we're meeting or working to meet the 853, which is a huge standard. They've kind of made it nice by breaking it down and pulling the subset out, but it still doesn't make it what I would say easy. There's still a lot to it, which again is great just for cybersecurity in principle, but also to meet the requirements so that you can continue to have government contracts. As we worked for compliance of 800.171, that's a direct mirror now of CMMC version 2, which will be compliance based on audits and having a company like myself coming out doing the assessments of your company. So a 3CPO will come out and give you an assessment. And right now it's looking to be pass fail. That may change with the interim rule. But for right now, it's you will meet the controls or you do not meet the controls. Excellent. So it's definitely something to work towards.
Great. And I'll I think you might be interested that half the participants here today have not submitted an assessment score, which is interesting. It could be that they're not required to, but most that are handling CO do. But all the participants, with the exception of about 2%, indicate that they plan on trying to meet these requirements within the next 12 months.
That's awesome. And it's definitely something that we have to work towards. And I know when you're dealing with the government and everything seems to slide to the right, it's we tend to either jump early or wait till we finally get some answers. And I can tell you, I'm in touch with the CMMC accreditation body weekly as a 3CPO candidate. We have constants meetings and town halls, and we see it coming down the road. It is going to happen. The DoD, with the move to version 2, has decided to tighten it up and come up with a good skill set, rule set for it. And that's what we're waiting on now. Again, that's about a year out, but they don't plan to have a long lead in after the rule set hits. They expect us to be working it now so that when the rule sets hit, we're ready to actually get certified, and they expect to have the whole system in place. So it is best, and it's good to hear that everyone is planning ahead. And I'm glad you're here, because this is what we're trying to do, is educate everyone onto what is coming and what you need to do. Under NIST 800-171, again, which is going to be CMMC, the control sets are exactly the same now. These are the 14 different domains that under each have a set of controls. So if you were to get a contract now, you would have to upload this information again with a scorecard. But just running through, you have your access controls, your awareness and training. They're working towards a 12-month training system versus the one-time death by PowerPoint. But that's, again, to be determined in the rule set. But you have to have a decent awareness and training program for your employees. Your audit and accountability, that's how are you tracking your system logs? So do you have a SIM? What are you doing to monitor your networks? Your identification and authentication, your configuration management, incident response plans. Do you have one? Are you practicing it? Are you doing tabletops? The maintenance of your systems. Do you have routine maintenance? Do you have no maintenance? I know small businesses, often the maintenance is, if my laptop breaks, I buy another one. That's your maintenance plan, but you have to determine how you get rid of the old laptop. Whole nother problem. Media protection, your USBs, are we blocking them? How are we using your connected devices to your device, to your workstations? Physical protection, this one's going to be unique. A lot of people are working at home or a hybrid environment. How are you protecting your workers who work from home? What are they doing with their company devices in their home workspace? All something to consider. Risk assessments, are you actually doing risk assessments? Are you testing them? Are you doing security assessments, vulnerability pen tests, those kind of things? System and communications protections. What does your firewall look like? How is it configured? What's allowed inbound and outbound? What ports are you using? Do we lock down unused ports? And then system and information integrity. How do you know who's on your network and when? What kind of intrusion detection devices do you have on your networks now? So it seems very, very overwhelming, and it can be, but that's why we try to break it down into some nice chunks. The digital Beachhead playbook. Ease of implementation. The biggest thing with CMMC and 800-171 is understanding where your CUI exists and what is going to be your security boundary. We've had clients that have a small 50-person company, but only 3 of which are actually working a contract that has CUI from the government. The rest of the company has no access or no need to access CUI. So if we can segment those 3 users out into a subnet or a separate network within the company, this extreme 171 CMMC level 3 clarification and audit would only need to be on that subset versus the entire network, which greatly reduces your costs. So knowing where your data is stored, how your data flows, knowing what is CUI, where your CUI is, and who needs it. It's all super important to your scoping. And when you bring down your scope, you bring down the cost and makes it affordable. Also using online tracking tools. That's why we've partnered with SureShield. They have an excellent database where you track every control and the information for that control to include the evidence and proof that you're meeting the control. It tracks the policy and the procedures that go against that individual control. So it is a much more affordable way than trying to keep track of a spreadsheet that might get lost, changed, updated, no version control, and much more difficult to track your evidence in tandem with that spreadsheet. So it's a great centralized point at a reasonable cost to be able to track your compliance. We offer the virtual CISO, the virtual Chief Information Security Officer. And we do that because we like to be partners. We want to partner up with everybody that we work with instead of just coming in and giving you some advice for a week or two or trying to point you in the right direction. We want to team up and be there for you for the whole ride so that we can answer your questions and help you as you get started. And those things can include having the awareness training, providing you with some vulnerability testing and those kind of things. And basically, we're a service disabled, veteran-owned small business, and I hire primarily veteran entrepreneurs and other IT guys that I've worked with throughout my military career, so that we are all a team of experts coming to help you. The other part of our playbook is making sure you are up to date and you know what are the requirements as a 3CPAO. If we're helping you get ready, we cannot audit you, but we do have other 3CPAO friends that will audit you, and we work together so they know what we do so that we can help that audit process go much more smoothly. And our step one is defining what CUI you need to manage. What contracts say you have CUI and where are you storing it? And then we complete a review of the entire 110 controls and provide you with that gap analysis so you know what controls you're meeting and what controls you need to shore up on. Within the SureShield partnership, we also have all the templates for all the policies and procedures you need to meet the standards for 800-171 and CMMC. So these are just some of our service deliverables that if you work with us, we would give you: the gap analysis, creating your system security plan. The SSP is the Bible that any auditor will go to, because this is where you highlight what you are doing for network security. After the gap analysis, we will create a plan of action and milestones, which effectively tracks any stop gaps that you need and help you get that to completion. The SPRS score, that's where you, on a contract up until CMMC becomes the rule of the land. Right now, that is the interim where you will have to upload your score into the SPRS system. It's on the PIEE system, same place where WAF is. And then we will work with whatever systems you have to help you get ready, or we can refer you to our partners to provide you things such as the CMMC in a box. We work with a company. If you're a small business and you can't afford to bring in all this expensive equipment, they have developed a compliance toolkit inside of a small network box that they can bring in that would provide you with a SIM and a firewall and all the things you need that you can segment off your CMMC zone. We provide penetration and vulnerability testing, and we help with the phishing tests and the awareness testing. So we try to provide you the full service of what you need in a cost-effective, affordable manner. And with that, I pass it over to SureShield. All right.
Tom, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think we can't hear
Sorry
you.
about that. My apologies, everyone. I was on mute. Thank you. And I was saying, it sounds, Mike, like you have a lot of different options for the clients that you serve in terms of evaluating what their requirements or needs are and being able to target some of those specific services to them. So how we, just briefly, how, as Mike mentioned, how we're helping in this process is we do provide technology in 3 different areas that's offered through Digital Beachhead in areas of security management. So, part of a process is making sure that you're doing vulnerability management and remediation. You may have a provider who's helping you with that, but you definitely need to have an ongoing system or process for doing that. Not only as a requirement of CMMC and NIST, but really as a good, sound protection process. You should have this in place because, as we know, we are constantly having new vulnerabilities and new attacks that are coming in. So that's where that solution will help with, along with some tools that can help identify where CUI may be sitting. And then, as Mike mentioned, leveraging a compliance framework system that we provide that allows you to semi-automate the whole data capture, collection, assessment, and proof component. As he indicated, beyond if you're answering something as being compliant, you better have the supporting evidence to do that, to support that answer. And again, you can assume the government is going to become more adherent and more focused on making sure that if you're submitting something that's saying that you've met a particular requirement, you have the proof to back that up. And as part of what we provide in that solution is the opportunity, or is a way for you to actually complete with that the full system security plan, at least in terms of having the creation of that once ready and having that ready to be submitted, as well as the NIST 800 assessment score that needs to get provided, and the POAM. So our systems help automate to some degree those kind of processes. So that's how we kind of partner with the partners that we work with. They bring the obviously expertise and understanding of what needs to be done and how to get you there. And we provide tools that help make that more efficient and even provide some more additional knowledge and information to help make sure you're doing that in a continuous manner. And as Mike said, this will not be kind of a one-time static process. So solutions that you will get through Digital Beachhead and through SureShield will allow you to constantly monitor where you stand at any given time. So as you are closing gaps, you can see what the impact is, not only on your scores, but on your SSP, on your POAMs, and the likes. So again, that's our playbook for helping support the partners that we work with. So Mike, if we want to go on to the next slide. If you will, I think you're getting close to wrapping up the session here, Mike.
Yeah, I would just like to say, we have plenty of time for questions. I know that's usually where a lot of people, they come with their built-in questions. But working with SureShield, what we like to provide is that partnership with your company. So to keep to the focus, which was how do we keep this cost down and make it not so difficult, it is really about learning your networks, learning your organization, scoping out what is actually required for you to become compliant, and then building your secure boundary for compliance based on your individual company needs. I like to say that it doesn't necessarily need to have all of your HR and back office folks in a super secure CMMC environment. It's nice to make sure that they have security, but at what level? And so our company likes to say the path to cybersecurity begins with a conversation. It is very difficult to say we're all the same. Everyone is individual. So we love to start this conversation, and we can start here with some, questions and answering your questions, but we would also love to have a greater consultation later on. We can provide that free consultation just to, get the conversation going, right? It's just to get us started.
Excellent. So with that, Sorry,
I
Mike.
was just going to say, Danny has been putting into our conversation too that yes, if you've heard the bird in the background, that is our director of communications, Cashew. She's our rescue. She is our rescue cockatiel. During COVID, the parrot rescue couldn't keep their doors open. And my wife kindly rescued this cockatiel who decided that she loved me more than anything else in the world and now stays with me 24/7.
That's good. Well, I mean, all of us have those new environments that we're working with. I have a rescue dog that likes to sit and hang out sometimes on my sessions as well. So we're going to go ahead now and open this up to Q&A. If you can go into your Zoom box, you'll see that there's an area that says Q&A. And please go ahead, if you have questions, fill them out in there. We did open up a poll, and we'll keep that poll open till the end of the session as well. If you have interest in contact from Digital Beachhead for that free consultation to kind of do a needs assessment for you, please go ahead and answer in that area, and representatives from the company will be following up with you post this webinar to get that consultation set up.
No worries. I was going to say, we have some questions coming in.
Yep.
I will type answers in as well, so they'll be recorded, but I'll just answer them, here now.
And I can go ahead and read those to you, Mike, if you want to go ahead and answer.
Yeah,
so
perfect.
As you can see, we have one as you're typing in. Does a really small company need to have an IT department to implement these measures? And if we don't, how does it work?
I would say you definitely do not need to have an IT department. I would always appoint someone as your IT lead, just someone who has the most IT experience. But there are MSPs, managed service providers, that can provide you with that kind of third-party IT department services. And if we come in like as a virtual CISO, we could help connect you with those kind of organizations to make sure you're getting the right one for your company. They're not necessarily super expensive, but they help you manage the day-to-day tasks that not having an IT department and only appointing, the person who wasn't at the meeting on Thursday, therefore was appointed your IT department. In a small business, we all know how that goes. Or the person who says, I configured something at home, so voila, you're now in charge of the IT for the company. It's good to have some sort of IT support, but it doesn't necessarily need to be an on-prem IT department.
Sure.
Definitely work outside the box.
And then there's another question about, are you willing to work with small businesses, less than 10 computers? And I think this also comes from, in the past, folks were finding, because there was a little less clarity, it's, as you said, not everything is the same. So I think that some folks were getting hit with some pretty large proposals and some pretty large costs for businesses of their size, which was probably making them consider whether they even wanted to start off in this or continue on with this. So the question is, are you willing to work with small businesses?
Absolutely. Our smallest client has 4 systems. Our largest client has over 600 systems. So we work the whole gamut. And again, it's that scoping, it's that size. If you have less than 10 computers and your CUI requirement is also very small, we have ways and means that we talk to you about probably not even putting those 10 systems into what we would call the CUI environment. We create a couple of laptops and build you a small segmented CUI environment. Or if everybody does deal with it, then we'll get you onto a CUI environment for your whole company, being that it's only 10 computers. So yeah, we have no qualms with small businesses. That was my focus when I got out of the military, was to help the small to medium-sized businesses, because I am one. I was one. I did federal contracting before we got into helping federal contractors. So I feel your pain, and absolutely we can help.
Great. And then there's a question about, at least in the presentation, it said a lot of the references were to Microsoft and Azure. Do you work with clients? I think the question is, what if I have clients in AWS and other non-Microsoft tools?
Absolutely. We can help you. Sadly, and I say sadly because, you know, everyone has their concerns about the Microsoft world. Microsoft has set up a very vibrant government system and program. AWS is similar, not quite as in-depth as Microsoft, but between Microsoft and AWS, absolutely. Other non-Microsoft tools apart from AWS, there is more difficulty or possibly more expense. We have a client that's currently working in a Google environment. And so their decision and their business model, they are going to have to decide whether they implement all the tools required to get their Google environment up to speed, or whether they just swap into kind of a pre-configured Microsoft Azure or AWS environment. But that's the goal, is to work with you to find out what's the best for you.
Gotcha. And then this is actually, I think, a twofold. Is the question is, and I might be able to answer this, and you can back me up on this, Mike. There's a question around if you're selling a COTS product, will that have to be CMMC and or NIST 800-171 certified? And at least from my understanding is most likely, particularly if you have done any kind of moderate configuration to fit into that environment, that would be something that they would want to have certified. But I don't know what your take on that is, Mike.
It honestly would depend on if your COTS product has anything to do with controlled unclassified information. If it is simply, you know, application X that anyone in the world can buy, the application has nothing specific in it that's government related, absolutely not. It will not need to be CMMC certified. Because it'd be like going to Best Buy. Right? If it's just something that you can buy anywhere, you should be good to go. It's if that COTS product through your company is altered or in any way has something that's government specific, then possibly. But if you're just selling product X that anyone in the world can buy, there would be no problem.
And I don't know if you can see the last question at the bottom. I'm not sure how to interpret this. It's probably what a lot of people deal with is they hear one thing from the contracting officer and they hear something from others. I believe it's a question around whether they really have CUI or not, but
yes, that to the point of the slide when I said, what is CUI? Well, that really depends. Technically, the contract must call out that you will be responsible for protecting CUI. So you should get a DD Form 254 that outlines that you will have to protect CUI information. If you don't have that, per the contract, you're not required to protect CUI, and you will only need to be level 1 in CMMC, which is a self-attest 17 control set. Not super difficult to obtain. Having worked with the government, we all know, as I said, we'll get that email that says this information is CUI, and they shouldn't be sending it out to you because you don't have a reason to protect it. I think those bugs will have to be worked out as and when we roll to it. But in the definitive terms of do you need to protect for CUI, we need to be level 2 certified. If there's no call out in a contract for CUI, I can't see the government requiring you to be level 2 compliant because they haven't called out you need to be such in the actual contract. Whether they accidentally or otherwise send you CUI after that, that's a different, that'll be a different problem that they'll have to sort out after the fact.
And actually, this is more a question for me. Just speak to the C3PAO process, meaning I think, you know, for folks that work with, as folks know in the marketplace, you have RPOs that are very good, that are there to help you get prepared. The nice thing with the C3PAOs is that they're going to be able to help you get prepared. Of course, they then can't do the audit, but think of I think you have another level of education that comes through becoming a C3PAO that allows you to give a lot of good insight as to what someone will need to do to be prepared should they go through, when they go through that audit. Correct?
Right. And what we're doing in the 3CPAO community is a lot of us are working together because we've been told, of course, if we help you get ready, we can't do your assessments. But we're working together with partner organizations, other 3CPAOs, where we're able to say, how are you helping your companies get ready, your clients get ready? And then that way, when we are then asked to be the 3CPAO auditor for those partner companies, we already have a step up. We already know what and how they've been preparing their companies. So the audit should go easier. I'm not coming in ground zero and just doing an inspection, not knowing anything about it. And vice versa, they're doing the same for us. So as we help a company get ready, we're going to have 3CPAOs that we've worked with and demonstrated how we're helping the companies and our clients get ready. So when they go in and do your audits, they kind of have that, okay, I understand what has been done here. We understand the policies, the procedures. And so the audit goes much more smoothly, quickly, and hopefully cost effectively.
I see a question here. Is acoustical work on SCIF facilities more likely to be level 1 or level 2?
If you are just doing works in a SCIF and you are inside of the SCIF, again, and this is on any if you have what we like to call the butts and seats, right? And you are only working on site on the government's networks, you will not have to be level 2 because you're performing them on their systems. If you're doing the acoustical work on a SCIF, as long as you have nothing that the government considers to be CUI, you can be level 1. If some of your reports, and sometimes reports are what bite us, the reports that maybe show deficiencies, they may consider it CUI, and if they consider it CUI, then you would have to be level 2.
Great. And I see a question, and I think it was probably answered about working with small companies. It was asking, how about 1 person, 2 computers, and leave the CUI on the client's enclave? You know, I think the question is, what level will I be kind of monitored at?
Right. If you are able to not have CUI on your corporate network or on any corporate device, and they don't call out that you need to do that, then you can be at level 1. If for some reason that CUI has to be within your enclave or something on your devices, again, the 1 person, 2 computers, if one of those computers helps create that CUI, you create a document that contains CUI, or you create a program that is considered CUI, you have to go to level 3. But if you can maintain your computers simply for communication, say with the government, contract communications, but you're actually working on the information on the client's machines or enclaves, then you do not need to be at level 3. And that's why I say scoping is important. How does the data flow? Where is the CUI? Who has it? So it is important to understand where that CUI exists and how do you access it. But that's a great question.
Another one, my company does not keep CUI on its IT assets. I have assets from a DoD prime configured in accordance with their security policies that have the CUI. What in general are my responsibilities for CMMC?
Well, that answer to this will be twofold. As long as, similarly, if you're using the government's assets, if you're using your prime's assets, so you say a laptop for an example, and they give you your prime's laptop, you're only using your prime's laptop to store that CUI. The question would be the data flow. Does it flow through your network? And where does that CUI reside? Anywhere apart from, your prime? But secondarily, it depends on what your prime does for flow down. Most primes are being told to flow down their CUI, their CMMC requirements to their subs. So unless you're only using that asset from the prime on the prime's network, you probably won't have an issue. But if you are using that prime's asset on your company's network, you might have to then, you'll probably get it flowed down. Great question. And again, as you can see, the more and more questions we get, it is really about scoping. It's about coming in and saying, where are you? Where is it? How are you protecting it?
And then we have a question on, do you need to have a completely different Windows domain for select users?
Possibly. Again, doing the scoping, if with our example, with our client who had 50 computers, but only 3 that really dealt with CUI, they had multiple contracts, and only 1 really dealt with CUI. It was much more cost effective to create them their, what we called their company name gov.com domain, set that up in a secure environment. They happened to choose Microsoft Azure and GCC High, and they did that for their 3 computers. They actually used 4 because 1 needed to be an administrative computer. But then they only had that segmentation and the cost of being GCC High in this higher level cloud environment for the 4 computers. It was just a cost savings for trying to bring the whole company network over. But if you only have 4 computers, it might just be as easy to move everybody over. So it really depends on your individual situation.
Great, we have some more, and we still have time here, so appreciate all the questions coming in. We've got
love the questions.
about another 12 minutes, but we have a question as FSO, I assess government sites that claim everything is CUI. How do we isolate only the FSO system to comply? All access is by a laptop via Wi-Fi.
If they are claiming that everything is CUI, it's one thing to claim, it's another thing to put it into the contract in writing and provide you with the 254. If they're doing that and they say in the contract, everything is CUI, everything you're looking at is CUI, and you are accessing their sites with your laptop, I would either go one of 2 routes. I would recommend the government provide you with a government laptop and you access via the NIPR, SIPR, whatever they, level system that you can through whatever secure means on a government system. Therefore, your company has no access to CUI. If they don't do that, then you have that simple 1 laptop that I would have to get you up to like level 2 on. And it would be, it's more than just the laptop and the Wi-Fi. Then you're going to be dealing with your email connections, and if they email you CUI. So it's going to be a deep dive of what are you doing with CUI? Does the CUI flow? Do you actually download any of that CUI? So really, I see the question was from Jay. I would say that would really be something we'd have to look at in the contract. What are they saying is CUI in the contract, and how are you supposedly accessing it? Great question. And I hope everyone can see that this is why it's individual, and we have to look at everyone as an individual and find the best path instead of just saying, let's just do everything.
Great. And then there's a question around, would a CMMC program which was created from CUI be considered CUI?
That would, again, go back to the contract. If they said that you are creating CUI, I would guess that if you're using CUI to create something, even if the output isn't CUI, if whatever, you take 3 things of CUI and you can output something that's not CUI, if you still have those things that you needed to create the CMMC program, then you're still going to be in possession of that CUI. But again, it would depend on what the contract says and what information you actually maintain and what information you create.
Excellent. Would a split cloud environment be advisable in larger organizations, especially if Exchange is involved?
We do, depending on what would be CUI. So like with my client, we definitely did the split cloud. They had their company corporate information, and then we created them a specific environment based on the Azure cloud that was GCC high, just for the small portions that actually maintain CUI. So the first step would be, what is CUI? Who has it? Who uses it? Where does it need to flow? And can we segment it out of our larger organizational network? And I see Jay kind of followed up with the FSO question, that the FSO is not specified in the contract's requirement. Yeah, the FSO then, if you're just talking about FSO duties and collecting JPAS and those kind of things, those functions are not going to be considered CUI. You're just looking up the site, and the storage is all on the government systems. You're just accessing. You have no local storage. You might have PII implementations.
And we still have time for a few more questions. And as I mentioned as well, please, it looks like most folks have completed the consultation question, but that survey is still open. If you would like to be contacted by Digital Beachhead, as you can hear, and I'm hearing from Mike, there's a lot of different things that are depending upon your environment that was going to determine how you're going to need to set things up appropriately. And they will help a lot with that process.
Yeah, it is really boiling down, and this is why I think we wanted to have the webinar. Is most people just are afraid, like, oh, the expense of turning my entire network over. And the first thing we need to do is, take that step back, take a breath, and find out what and where is that CUI information, and can we keep it separated from the rest of the network? And if we can segment it out and provide protections and toolkits to a more limited number, or a separate domain if possible, that will greatly reduce the cost than saying I have to just take my whole network and rearrange how I'm doing business today so that I can meet these qualifications and certifications.
And just one last, at least question from my end, and this is what I have been hearing. I know that they had talked about level 2 having possibly 2 different paths, one being a self-assessment or self-attestment, I should say, and one being an audit. But, and you can tell me what you're hearing, but the last I've heard is they really don't think there's going to be that many that are in a level 2 that will not have to go through an audit.
They kind of did away with the bifurcation of that into 2 different things. So everyone in level 2 will be audited.
They will, okay.
Yeah, and the reason for that was the question, what is CUI?
Mm-hmm.
And okay, is there a bad CUI, good CUI? really, really important CUI and a not so important CUI? They don't have that delineation. So how would they pick? Where would they delineate between who needs an audit and who doesn't? And so the DoD kind of nodded their head and went, understood, it's CUI is CUI, and if we say it's CUI, you need to have an audit. We can't, we're not going to subdivide CUI into upper and lower levels.
Right. And then there's another question from the same gentleman about receiving DCSA emails that do not contain CUI but require downloading files. Sometimes those files are CUI without prior notice.
Again, it really, you either have to push back on the contracting office and say, why am I being sent CUI when it's not in the contract to do so? The best place to do that, in my experience, is say, I will be happy to amend the contract to handle this CUI for an additional $1 billion. Joking at the dollar amount, but that you have called out in my contract, I am not responsible for CUI, yet I'm continuously being sent CUI. So you do have to push back on contracting and say either you're going to, pay us for the responsibility of CUI, or you're going to have to stop sending us CUI.
Right. And I think it's also safe to say for all the folks that are on here, if you are a government contractor doing business with the Department of Defense, regardless of what level you're at, you're going to have to either attest that you're meeting those requirements in going through this process, whether it's at a level 1 or a level 2 or a level 3, right? So you're not going to be able to, quote unquote, escape it. And so it's, worthy to at least make sure that regardless that you have the proper controls and pieces in place to make sure. And from what I'm seeing, and again, if you're doing self attestments, they're going to put a lot more, I would say, controls around that in terms of if you're attesting that you're doing it, you better be doing it, right? Because they're not going to allow that attestment is now going to be required to be done by someone at, I would say, the highest level of the organization, and you are then on the block to back up what you say you're doing.
And the word we're hearing is even within this next year with the self-attestments, the DIBCAC may come out and do random audits to make sure those companies that say, yes, we're meeting these are actually meeting them.
So I think we're getting close to the end. There are 2 more questions that I wanted to see if we might be able to get to quickly, Mike.
Sure.
One is a subcontractor. My prime has asked me to at least comply with level 1 requirements. Yep. Does only level 1 capability imply that I can assume that I will not need to have access to CUI and meet level 2 requirements?
Yes. If they're telling you level 1 is all you need, you should not expect CUI. If they start sending you CUI or, telling you to deal with CUI, you need to be at level 2. And that would be a discussion, like I said, with the government. In your case, it would be with your prime. If you now are moving us into the realm of needing CUI, we need to renegotiate what our work is. But if they're telling you that level 1 is all you're going to need, I'm assuming they're guessing you will not be in possession of CUI or need possession of CUI at any point.
And I think we're getting to the end. There was one last question before we wrap up the session. Is what if we have DEER 7012 but no DD 254? And I'm assuming what that is. Tom does not.
Yeah, I would say if you have, typically you should have the DD 254, but if they have you some documentation saying that you are going to be required to handle CUI, one, I would ask for a 254, but 2, if they're calling it out in the contract through any document, they could write it in as a clause even into your contract without a DD 254 saying you are responsible for managing CUI. Then you're going to be responsible for managing CUI as part of the contract, 4 corners of the contract. The DD 254 is just the kind of like approved DoD contracting document that should talk about classifications, which CUI now is.
Great. Well, I'm sorry. There's a couple more questions, but I know we're getting to the end of time. So we will make sure that we capture those and follow up with the folks that have asked those. And again, for those of you that raised your hand saying you'd like to be contacted by the folks from Digital Beachhead, they will be following up with you directly. And certainly if you're interested maybe later, you'll have information in the slides and in the follow-up emails on how to contact either us or the Digital Beachhead folks, and we'll direct them. Anything that comes to us through this, we'll direct on to them as well. So we want to thank everybody for a very lively session. Mike, really appreciate your time today and the knowledge that you bring really to help these folks, because everybody wants to do the right thing, but they want to do it in a way that's not going to break the bank. And hopefully we and Digital Beachhead can assist you in that process. So again, thank you everyone for the time. Be on the lookout for the content of presentation as well as the webinar audio as well and visual. Thanks again, and we look forward to working with you all. All the best.
Appreciate you coming out.